Beneath the soft hush of night, Africa lies stretched across the earth like an ancient giant in a deep and patient sleep. Mountains sigh, deserts whisper, and valleys shimmer beneath the moonlight. But far below the surface, something stirs. For millions of years, a slow, silent current has been pulling at the land. As if the earth itself were gently reshaping a masterpiece it began long ago. Rivers follow invisible cracks. Volcanoes glow beneath thin blankets of rock. And in the stillness between heartbeats, the continent shifts. Not enough for the eye to see, but enough for the future to feel. They say continents are like old stories, changing so slowly that no one notices until the ending comes. And tonight, you and I will follow one of the greatest stories the planet has ever written. A story whispered in the dark. A story written in fire and stone. A story of how Africa is splitting into two. Tonight, we embark on a journey through deep time, across serene valleys, beneath sleeping volcanoes, and into the hidden machinery of the earth itself. For years, the idea that Africa could one day divide into two separate continents sounded like a myth told only by geologists and dreamers. A quiet rumor buried within textbooks. A tale too vast, too slow, too immense for most to imagine. And yet, the evidence has been rising. In the great rifts that carve through the land. In the trembling faults beneath our feet. In the molten rivers moving far below us. Signs that scientists once overlooked or misunderstood are now revealing an extraordinary truth. Africa is transforming. In this film, you will discover how the continent first began to tear, why gigantic cracks are appearing in places like Ethiopia and Kenya, what force beneath the earth is pushing two ancient landmasses apart, and how, millions of years from now, a brand new ocean will flow where grasslands now sleep. But do not fear. This is not a story of disaster. It is a story of creation. A slow, gentle reshaping of the world, unfolding over millions of years, far beyond the pace of any human life. So settle in, let the world outside dim, and allow the earth to tell you its quiet, patient secret, as we begin our journey into the heart of a continent that is slowly, gracefully, dividing. If you could lift the entire planet like a giant onion and peel away the top layer, you'd find something surprising. The earth is not a calm, solid ball at all. It only pretends to be. On the surface, everything feels steady. You can place a cup on a table, and unless your cat pushes it off, it will stay there. But deep below your feet, the ground is slowly moving, stretching, shaking, and drifting like an old man shifting around in his sleep. Scientists call this quiet dance plate tectonics. But don't worry, this isn't school. No quizzes here. Think of it this way. The Earth's crust, the part we live on, is broken into huge puzzle pieces. These pieces float on top of a soft, hot layer underneath. And because that layer moves, the puzzle pieces move too. Not fast, of course. If continents raced around like bumper cars, we'd all need seatbelts just to walk outside. Instead, they move at about the speed your fingernails grow. Slow enough that nobody notices, but fast enough that after a few million years, well, big changes happen. And Africa, beautiful ancient Africa, is right in the middle of one of the biggest changes on Earth. Now, before we go too far, let's set the scene. Imagine the Earth millions of years ago. The continents were all clumped together in one giant landmass called Pangaea. It looked like the world was trying to make the biggest cookie possible. But cookies crumble, and Pangaea slowly broke apart. The continents floated away, each going off on its own adventure. Africa drifted into its place like someone settling on the perfect spot on a couch. But here's the twist. Continents don't stay put forever. They can be pulled, pushed, cracked, stretched, or even torn in half. And right now, Africa is experiencing the quiet beginning of one of these slow, dramatic changes. The reason? The Earth just never stops moving. Under Africa lies a powerful force, like a giant hot bubble rising from deep inside the planet. It's called a mantle plume, but picture something simpler. Imagine a pot of soup that's been on the stove for too long. Every now and then, a hot bubble rises, stretching the thin layer at the top. The Earth does the same thing, only with rocks instead of soup. And Africa is sitting above one of these gigantic rising heat plumes. You can think of it like the Earth saying, "Hey Africa, scoot over a little," while gently nudging from below. This rising heat pushes upward and outward, stretching the land. Not enough to make buildings fall or send lakes flying into the air. No, it's much slower and more polite than that. But over millions of years, this gentle stretching adds up. Imagine pulling slowly on a piece of warm bread dough. At first, nothing happens. Keep pulling, and tiny cracks begin to appear. Pull even more, slowly, patiently, and eventually, the dough splits into two pieces. Africa is that warm dough. Now, you might be thinking, if the Earth is so restless, why don't we feel it? Well, for the most part, it just moves quietly in the background. The continents glide on their molten base so slowly that your entire life, from your first steps to your last gray hair, happens before the continent has moved even a few meters. In other words, Earth is restless, but also extremely slow. Kind of like a sleepy turtle trying to get out of bed. But just because the movement is slow doesn't mean it's small. Over millions of years, these tiny movements can transform the shape of entire continents. Mountains rise, oceans open, valleys stretch, and fault lines appear like wrinkles on the face of the planet. Africa sits right on top of one of the most dramatic of these wrinkles, the Great Rift System. But that's for the next chapter. For now, let's stay with the bigger picture. The surface of Earth is like a giant jigsaw puzzle made of huge slabs called tectonic plates. There are about a dozen major plates, and many smaller ones. Africa is actually made up of more than one plate: the Nubian plate, the bigger part, and the Somali plate, the rebellious younger sibling that's already trying to run away. These plates are slowly moving away from each other, and that movement is what's stretching the continent. The cause of this movement is the heat rising from below. Heat makes things expand, push, and shift. Think of the Earth's mantle as a slow cooker that's been running for billions of years. The rocks inside move in giant circles, up, across, down, and back again. These are called convection currents, but you can think of them as giant lava escalators, lifting and shifting the plates above. When these currents push upward under Africa, the land stretches like rubber. At first, it develops small cracks. Over time, the cracks grow deeper. Volcanoes appear along the edges. Valleys widen. Lakes form. And eventually, if the stretching continues long enough, the continent begins to tear into two separate pieces. Don't worry. This isn't happening anytime soon. It's not like Africa will split next week or during breakfast tomorrow morning. This process takes tens of millions of years. Enough time for humans to evolve, go extinct, come back again, invent new dances, new governments, and probably argue about completely new things. Still, this slow motion change is real. Scientists can measure it. They use satellite data, GPS sensors, and even the patterns of earthquakes to track how the plates are drifting. And everything they find points to the same conclusion: Africa is slowly pulling apart. And this isn't unusual. Continents have been breaking and reforming since the planet was young. The Atlantic Ocean is actually the result of a similar split that happened around 180 million years ago. What used to be connected, the Americas and Africa, slowly drifted apart until the ocean filled the gap. Africa today is at the early stages of just such a process. The land is stretching. The cracks are widening. New valleys are forming. Volcanoes are waking up. And someday, very far in the future, a new ocean will rush in and create two separate continents. But before we get to this ocean of the future, or the lakes that hint at it, or the volcanoes bubbling quietly under the surface, we need to understand the most important thing. The Earth is alive. Not alive like a person, of course. It doesn't have a heartbeat or a favorite snack, but alive in the sense that it constantly changes, constantly moves, and constantly reshapes itself. And Africa is part of that long, patient story. In the next chapter, we'll go down into the Great Rift Valley, a place where you can actually see a continent being pulled apart. A place where massive cliffs rise on either side like the walls of a giant scar. A place where the Earth is quietly writing its next chapter. But for now, just breathe, relax, and let your mind drift across the slow rhythm of the Earth's movement. The story of Africa's split has only just begun. If you ever wanted to see what it looks like when a continent slowly pulls itself apart, there's one place on Earth where you don't need fancy equipment, a spaceship, or a degree with too many syllables. All you need is a trip to East Africa. Because right there, stretching thousands of kilometers like a giant scratch on the planet's surface, lies the Great African Rift System. This rift is not small at all. In fact, if the Earth had a stretch mark, this would be it. The Great Rift Valley runs from the Red Sea, through Ethiopia and Kenya, down across Tanzania, and continues all the way toward Mozambique. It's long, deep, dramatic, and beautiful. But most importantly, it's a sign that Africa is being gently pulled apart by forces much older than civilization, older than humanity, older than almost anything we know. But let's take it slow. This is a bedtime documentary, after all. Imagine walking across a wide, open plain somewhere in Kenya. The sky is soft and hazy, the air warm. You hear distant birds, maybe a zebra complaining about something, and everything feels peaceful. Then you reach the edge of the valley, and suddenly, the land drops away into a deep, enormous trench. Imagine a cut so wide that you can stand on one side and barely see the other through the afternoon haze. On both sides, giant cliffs rise like walls shaped by ancient hands. Below, the floor of the valley stretches for miles. Flat, fertile, dotted with lakes, villages, and the occasional giraffe minding its own business. This is not a normal valley. This is a wound in the earth. The Great African Rift System didn't form overnight. No dramatic crack suddenly split the continent while everyone was asleep. It started millions of years ago, when the land beneath East Africa began to stretch, slowly and steadily, like someone pulling warm dough apart. At first, nothing obvious happened. But eventually, as the tension grew, the crust began to sink and crack. Huge blocks of land dropped downward, creating valleys. Other blocks lifted upward, forming high ridges and mountains. If the Earth had a before and after photo, this place would be in it. The rift is actually made of two main branches, the Eastern Rift and the Western Rift. Think of them like two long arms of the same process, reaching across Africa. The Eastern Rift runs through Ethiopia and Kenya, famous for its steep cliffs and beautiful lakes. The scenery looks like nature went on a creativity spree. Volcanoes everywhere, hot springs bubbling, lakes with colors straight out of a painting, and valleys so wide you could land a small country inside. The Western Rift, on the other hand, is deeper and home to some of the largest lakes on Earth. Lakes so deep they look like the planet started digging a hole and then got distracted. Lake Tanganyika, for example, is the second deepest lake in the world. And yes, this depth is directly connected to the stretching and tearing happening beneath Africa. Both rift branches show the same story. The continent is pulling apart. Now here's something cool. Scientists can actually hear the rift stretching. Not with their regular ears, of course. That would be creepy. But with seismographs, machines that pick up the tiny vibrations deep underground. Every time the plates shift, no matter how softly, they produce small earthquakes. Most are so gentle they don't bother people at all. But they tell scientists something important. Africa is slowly drifting, millimeter by millimeter, like a sleepy giant rolling over in bed. Let's talk about what's happening under the rift, where the real action is. Below the crust sits the Earth's mantle, the hot, gooey, semi-melted layer that makes up most of the planet. Think of it like a very slow, very hot smoothie. Not the tasty kind. The mantle moves in huge, slow circles, rising in some places and sinking in others. And under East Africa, a giant column of hot rising mantle, called a plume, is pushing up from below. This rising heat weakens the crust, making it easier for the land to stretch. It's a bit like heating up chocolate just enough so you can bend it. The hotter it gets, the more it softens, and the easier it is to pull apart. As this happens, volcanoes begin to appear along the weak spots. And East Africa has plenty. Some volcanoes are dramatic and fiery. Others are quiet, gently leaking lava like they have all the time in the world. Some even produce unusual types of lava that look like black foam or dark honey. One of the most famous volcanoes sits in Ethiopia, Erta Ale, home to a rare, glowing lava lake that bubbles like a giant cauldron of orange soup. The rift is full of these fiery features, proof that the Earth is slowly cracking open beneath the surface. But even with all this activity, the Great Rift Valley isn't some chaotic, dangerous place. Millions of people live there, farm there, raise families there, and drink tea while chatting on porches that sit right above one of the biggest geological events on Earth. Nature is dramatic. Humans, we just adjust. This rift isn't only a place of geological activity, it's a place of life. The shifting land has created fertile valleys, unique lakes, and a rich mix of wildlife. Some of the earliest human ancestors, like Lucy, were found in the rift. The landscape, constantly shaped by tectonics, created the forests, grasslands, and lakes that supported early human evolution. So you could say, without the rift, we might not even be here. Not bad for a giant continental crack. Now here's something interesting. The Great African Rift System is not just a single crack. It's more like a network, a whole collection of cracks, faults, and valleys branching across the continent. Some parts move more than others. Some crack open suddenly, surprising everyone, like the famous fissure that opened in Kenya in 2018 and swallowed part of a road. One day people were driving. The next day, the road said, "Nope, I'm leaving," and split in two. Events like that remind scientists, and the rest of us, that the Great Rift is alive. But before you picture Africa suddenly tearing apart like a dramatic movie scene, relax. The rift's movement is incredibly slow. It's the kind of slow that makes glaciers look impatient. On average, the plates in East Africa move apart at about 2 to 5 millimeters a year. That's about the width of a grain of rice. You won't feel it. You won't see it. But it is happening. And one day, long, long after anyone alive today is gone, the rift will fully separate. A new ocean will pour into the valley. Islands will rise. Coastlines will change. The map of Africa will be redrawn. But for now, the Great Rift Valley is still in its early stages. Still stretching, sinking, cracking, and breathing. A giant masterpiece of nature, painted slowly across millions of years. In the next chapter, we'll look at the dramatic signs on the surface, those sudden cracks, sinking roads, and surprising events that show Africa's split isn't just a theory or a prediction. It's already happening right under our feet. For now, just picture that endless valley under the soft African sky, and the quiet, patient force that created it. If Earth ever tries to get your attention, it usually does it in one of two ways. Very quietly, or very dramatically. And every now and then, Africa gets a little reminder that the continent is slowly pulling apart. Not in secret, not underground, but right there on the surface where anyone with a smartphone can take a photo and post it online. Let's start with one of the most famous moments. Kenya, 2018. It began like a normal day. Birds singing, goats doing goat things, people driving to work, minding their business. And then, somewhere near the town of Maimahiu, the ground decided it had had enough of pretending to be calm. A massive crack suddenly opened in the earth, long, deep, and wide enough to swallow part of a highway. Imagine driving and seeing the road ahead of you just disappear. Not slowly, not politely, just gone. Like the earth hit a delete button. The crack stretched for kilometers across the landscape. In some places it was so deep you couldn't see the bottom. In others, it was wide enough to fit a small house. And because humans are humans, a few people walked right up to the edge to take selfies. Because of course they did. Scientists came rushing in, confused but excited. Was this a sign that the African continent was suddenly tearing apart faster than expected? Was something big happening underground? Was this the beginning of the new ocean we always talk about? Turns out, the answer was kind of, but not really. The crack didn't open in one dramatic instant the way it looked in photos. Heavy rainfall had washed away soft soil that had been sitting on top of a pre-existing fault. Basically, the ground was already cracked deep down below. The rain just cleared the cover like nature pulling off a blanket. Still, the message was clear. The fault and the crack were real, not random. They were part of the Great Rift system stretching across East Africa. And events like this show the world what scientists already know. The continent is under tension. But that was just one incident. Africa has a whole history of the ground splitting open in surprising ways. Let's go north to Ethiopia, home of dramatic landscapes, strong coffee, and some of the most active rift zones on Earth. In the Afar region, the hottest, driest, why is the sun so angry place on the planet, cracks form all the time. This area sits right where three tectonic plates meet: the African plate, the Somali plate, and the Arabian plate. It's basically a geological traffic jam. Back in 2005, something wild happened. A massive 60-kilometer-long crack tore open in just a few days. 60 kilometers. That's like the Earth saying, "Hold my lava, I'm doing something." People living nearby felt small earthquakes. Scientists watched the land drop by several meters. And deep below the ground, magma rushed into the gap, pushing the plates apart even more. The whole event was so fast and unusual that researchers from around the world flew in just to figure out what happened. One scientist said it was like watching a new ocean forming in fast forward. Of course, fast forward still means slow enough to drink tea while studying it, but compared to geological time, this was like the Earth sprinting. Now let's look at Eritrea, Djibouti, and parts of Tanzania, where cracks, faults, and fissures appear so often that locals shrug it off the way some people ignore a noisy neighbor. In Tanzania, for example, there are places where the ground sinks slightly every year. Farmers notice their land shifting. Rivers change course. Even buildings sometimes lean, not because of ghosts, don't worry, but because the ground beneath them is stretching like old fabric. But not every crack is a giant, dramatic surprise. Some are slow and steady, like a long-term breakup that everyone saw coming. Take the Natron region between Kenya and Tanzania. The ground there is pulling apart at a steady pace. Every year, tiny quakes shake the region and small cracks widen a little more. Lake Natron itself, famous for being so salty it looks like a giant red crystal bath, sits inside one of these stretched zones. The landscape looks alien. Flat plains of dried salt, steam rising from hot springs, and mountains that look like they were placed there by a designer with dramatic taste. These cracks are the surface scars of Africa's quiet splitting. Now, here's a fun fact. Sometimes, when the Earth stretches, it doesn't crack evenly. Parts of the land bend upward to create long ridges. Others sag downward to form valleys. This is why the Great Rift is full of tall cliffs and deep basins. And because of these basins, water often fills the low spots, forming lakes. So if you think about it, every time the Earth cracks open in East Africa, it's basically preparing another future lake. Talk about home renovation. Another dramatic example happened in 2009 near the town of Karonga in Malawi. A strong earthquake struck the region, and afterward, people found the ground had cracked open in jagged, uneven lines. One crack ran straight through a football field, which must have made the next game quite interesting. The cracks in Malawi were part of the Western Rift, a deep, powerful branch of the rift system that has created some of the largest lakes on Earth. When the ground there tears, it's usually connected to movement deep below, where the crust is thinning and sinking. But cracks don't always appear on dry land. Some form underwater at the bottoms of lakes. Lake Tanganyika and Lake Malawi, for example, both sit in giant rift basins that are still widening. Underwater earthquakes sometimes shake these lakes, creating new cracks on the lake floor. These cracks guide how the lakes grow, shift, and deepen. Imagine being a fish down there and watching your house slowly drift apart. Must be confusing. So, what do all these dramatic splits have in common? They are the visible clues that Africa is stretching. They are the Earth's quiet way of saying, yes, this is really happening. Most of these cracks are harmless. They don't signal sudden disaster. Instead, they are small pieces of a much bigger story unfolding over millions of years. A story where the land slowly weakens, slowly sinks, and slowly, oh so slowly, moves toward becoming two continents. For the people who live in these areas, life goes on. Farmers keep farming. Kids keep running around. Goats keep chewing everything they find. And somewhere beneath their feet, the ground continues its gentle shift. But every once in a while, Africa gives the world a reminder. A giant crack in a road. A sudden earthquake swarm. A valley sinking a few centimeters. A new fissure cutting across the open land. These are the Earth's postcards, little notes from below saying, "Don't forget, I'm still reshaping things." And the journey is only beginning. In the next chapter, we're heading deeper, into the molten world beneath Africa, where rising heat and glowing magma push the land apart like a slow, fiery heartbeat. If you ever visit East Africa on a quiet morning, when the air is cool and the sun is just beginning to warm the grasslands, the whole place feels peaceful, calm, almost too calm. You look around and think, nothing dramatic could possibly happen here. But beneath that still, golden surface, something very dramatic actually is happening. It's just slow, very slow, so slow that you can nap on top of it and never notice a thing. Tonight, we're wandering into one of the most important, most mysterious places on Earth, a place where the continent is gently, steadily pulling itself apart. It's called the Great African Rift Valley, and it's been quietly doing its thing for millions of years, without any need for attention or applause. Honestly, if continents had personalities, this one would be the quiet kid in class who slowly becomes a world-famous artist while no one is watching. Imagine the entire African continent as a giant loaf of bread. Now imagine someone taking that bread and gently stretching it from both sides. Not enough to tear it in half, but enough for a long crack to form down the middle. That long crack. That's the Rift Valley. And yes, a geologist would probably throw a textbook at me for using bread as an example, but it works, so we're sticking with it. The Rift Valley is basically a gigantic scar carved into the surface of the Earth. But it's not a sad scar, it's an active one. A living one. A scar that gets a tiny bit bigger every year, even while you sleep. This scar starts far up in the north, near the deserts and plateaus of Ethiopia, and travels all the way down toward Mozambique. That's more than 6,000 kilometers. It's so long that if you drove the whole distance, your legs might fall asleep before the rift does. Along this enormous stretch of land, the valley passes through deserts, grasslands, lakes that look like spilled turquoise paint, volcanoes that like to grumble in their sleep, and mountains that watch everything from a distance like ancient grandparents. Some places are famous: Lake Turkana, the Serengeti, Ngorongoro Crater, Lake Malawi, Mount Kilimanjaro. All of them exist because Africa is slowly pulling apart. You could say the Rift Valley is basically the Earth's version of a long zipper that's slowly being undone. Except this zipper leads to new landscapes instead of a jacket. Deep down beneath all of this is the reason for the split. And the reason is simple. The Earth is dramatic. A huge plume of hot magma is rising from the mantle, basically a massive bubble of heat pushing upward. Imagine someone pressing their thumb into the bottom of that giant bread loaf we talked about. The pressure builds, and eventually the crust stretches, cracks, and splits. That's what's happening beneath Africa. The land is being pushed, stretched, and slowly pulled away from itself. Not fast enough to notice, but fast enough that the planet is definitely up to something. If Africa's breakup had a main control room, it would be the Afar region in Ethiopia. This place is wild. It's one of the only places on Earth where you can stand on land and physically be on top of 3 tectonic plates pulling apart: the African plate, the Somali plate, and the Arabian plate. If plates were people, this would be the world's slowest, most awkward tug of war. Nobody wins, nobody gives up, and the ground just keeps splitting. The Afar landscape looks like a science fiction set. Lava fields stretch across the ground like black frozen waves. Colorful mineral pools bubble in strange neon shades. Cracks run so deep they look like the earth took a giant knife and sliced itself open. And the heat. The air feels like someone left the oven door open for 1,000 years. If someone told you this place was another planet undercover, you would probably nod and say, "Yeah, that makes sense." Of course, a valley like this doesn't form without firepower. And the rift has plenty of it. Volcanoes line the rift like glowing beacons, some peaceful, some, let's say, very expressive. There's Mount Nyiragongo in the Congo, famous for having one of the world's largest lava lakes. Picture a giant boiling pot of soup, except the soup is glowing orange and could eat your house. Then there's Erta Ale in Ethiopia, a volcano that has been erupting non-stop since the 1960s. Most people can't stick to a workout routine for a month, but this volcano has kept going for over half a century. A true example of dedication. But the rift isn't all fire and drama. It also creates beauty. Some of the world's most stunning lakes lie inside the cracks formed by the split. Lake Malawi is so clear you can see the fish shining like tiny gemstones. Lake Tanganyika is so deep it feels like it goes straight into another dimension. Lake Turkana stretches across the desert like a giant green-blue jewel. These lakes exist because when the earth tears itself open, the rain and rivers rush in and fill the spaces. Nature hates empty spots. The Rift Valley is more than a crack in the earth, it's a cradle of life. Many scientists believe early humans evolved in and around the rift. The shifting land created different environments: forests, plains, wetlands, and hills. Early humans had to adapt, explore, move, think, and survive in all of these places. So in a strange way, the same forces that are splitting Africa apart may have helped create the first humans. If continents could talk, Africa might say, "You're welcome." Even today, the rift is full of life. Lions patrol the grasslands. Flamingos gather in the thousands until lakes turn bright pink. Elephants wander along ancient paths carved by their ancestors. Hundreds of rare fish species swim in rift lakes, found nowhere else on Earth. The land may be moving, but life moves with it, adapting, thriving, growing. Now, before you start imagining Africa breaking into two pieces next Thursday, let's slow down the panic. The split is incredibly gentle. Most parts of the rift move about 2 to 5 millimeters per year. That's about the speed your nails grow. So yes, the continent is splitting, but nothing dramatic will happen in our lifetimes. Or the next 100 lifetimes. This is the kind of story where 1,000,000 years is considered pretty quick. The Great Rift Valley is a reminder that the Earth is never finished. It doesn't stay still. It stretches. It breathes. It changes itself whether humans notice or not. Sometimes change is loud, but sometimes, like here, change is soft, slow, patient. A quiet transformation that keeps going long after everyone has gone to sleep. As we drift deeper into the story, the rift continues its slow journey south, toward more lakes, more cliffs, and eventually toward the future ocean waiting to be born. If you could follow the Rift Valley further south, you'd notice the land starting to change in surprising ways. Valleys widen, mountains appear taller, lakes shimmer in unexpected colors, and cracks trace long lines across plains. Each feature tells the story of a continent slowly pulling itself apart, a story written in stone, water, and time. One of the most striking things about this region is the lakes. Unlike ordinary lakes that form in depressions or behind dams, Rift Valley lakes form because the earth is stretching. As the crust pulls apart, blocks of land sink while others rise. Water naturally fills the low spots. Some lakes, like Lake Tanganyika, are deeper than many mountains are tall. Lake Malawi is so long and narrow it feels like a turquoise ribbon cutting through the landscape. These lakes are not just scenic, they are living evidence of the rift's slow but unstoppable power. And it's not only water that responds. Volcanoes line the rift like a chain of watchful guardians. Some are small, gentle, almost shy. Others are explosive, active, and dramatic. Mount Kilimanjaro, though dormant, towers above the plains like a silent sentinel, a reminder of the Earth's restless energy. Further north, Urta Ale and Nyiragongo constantly bubble and hiss, their molten lakes glowing like giant orange eyes in the night. They serve as both a warning and a wonder. The continent beneath our feet is alive, breathing fire, shaping its own future. The rift is also a place of gentle earthquakes. Most are so minor that you wouldn't even feel them. A tiny tremor here, a faint shake there, and life carries on as usual. But these small quakes are like a heartbeat, a subtle pulse that reminds scientists and travelers alike that the land is moving, slowly stretching apart like a rubber band. Over millennia, those tiny movements accumulate, widening valleys, forming lakes, and creating cracks that can eventually split a continent. The wildlife here has adapted to the slow drama of the earth. Flamingos thrive in salty lakes that form in newly sunk valleys. Elephants walk along paths that have existed for thousands of years, tracing routes carved by shifting land. Predators and prey alike follow invisible rhythms dictated not only by seasons but by the subtle, patient transformations of the land. Life in the rift has learned to move with time, not against it. People have also adapted, sometimes in unexpected ways. Farmers notice when the ground has shifted slightly after a mild earthquake. Villagers build their homes with an understanding that the earth beneath them is not fixed. Roads occasionally split or sink, and the locals simply repair, adjust, and continue. They live alongside the slow but unstoppable forces that will one day shape a new ocean, a new landscape, and a new chapter for Africa. Geologists often describe the rift as a living laboratory. Every lake, volcano, and fault line tells a story of pressure, heat, and motion. By studying these features, scientists can understand not only how Africa is splitting, but also how continents have behaved throughout Earth's history. It's a chance to see the past, present, and future of our planet unfolding in real time, at a pace that humans can barely perceive. The Rift Valley also reminds us of scale. The Earth's movements are vast, spanning thousands of kilometers, yet almost imperceptible from day to day. A crack may grow by just a few millimeters each year. A volcano may rise by centimeters. A lake may deepen slightly. Over a human lifetime, these changes seem minor, almost invisible. But over millions of years, the landscape is transformed completely. Mountains rise, valleys form, and eventually, entire continents can split. One of the most fascinating parts of this slow transformation is how the land interacts with water. Rivers that once flowed in gentle curves are forced into new paths. Lakes form where none existed before. Water collects in the lowest parts of the rift, creating ecosystems that are rich, strange, and unique. Fish species evolve in isolated lakes, flamingos gather in enormous flocks, and the water itself mirrors the skies in ways that seem almost unreal. The rift creates a constant dialogue between land and water, a dance that has been going on for millions of years. Despite all this movement, the Rift Valley is not chaotic. It follows rules, invisible to us but clear to geologists. The land pulls, stretches, and sinks according to the forces deep below the crust. Magma rises in some areas, cracks widen in others, and blocks of land shift. Everything fits together like a slow-motion puzzle, where every piece moves in response to pressures we can barely imagine. It is a process both delicate and relentless. Perhaps the most profound lesson the rift offers is patience. Millions of years of slow stretching, cracking, and sinking have created a landscape that is extraordinary, dramatic, and full of life. Yet each change is almost imperceptible day by day. The earth teaches us that transformation does not always need to be sudden or loud. Sometimes, the most powerful forces are quiet, slow, and persistent. As night falls over the Rift Valley, the lava lakes glow faintly, the lakes reflect the sky, and the land continues its patient pull. A gentle earthquake trembles in the distance. Flamingos wade in shallow water, their reflections rippling in perfect synchrony. Elephants walk silently across plains that are shifting, millimeter by millimeter, beneath their feet. The earth does not hurry, yet everything is moving toward a new shape, a new story, a future that no human has seen but all humans will inherit. By observing the rift, we can understand how continents are not fixed, immutable objects. They are alive in their own slow, quiet way. Africa is not just a place on a map, it is a living, breathing entity, slowly, steadily dividing. Its future ocean, its future mountains, and its future lakes are being written today, line by line, crack by crack, over spans of time that make a human lifetime seem like a blink. And tonight, as you drift deeper into sleep, imagine the earth moving beneath your feet. Imagine the rift stretching south, lakes forming, volcanoes glowing, and the continent quietly rewriting itself. This is a story without an end, a transformation that began millions of years ago and will continue for millions more. And in its slow, deliberate way, it is one of the most beautiful stories the planet has ever told. The earth has a way of surprising us when we think we understand it. The Rift Valley is stretching, lakes are forming, and volcanoes are quietly bubbling, but the real magic happens deep underground, where heat, pressure, and molten rock are shaping the continent in ways we can only imagine. This is where the slow, patient work of splitting a continent really begins. Beneath the rift lies a hot, churning layer of the earth called the mantle. It isn't molten lava exactly, at least not like the rivers of fire we see on the surface. It's more like a thick, slow-moving paste of rock, heated to thousands of degrees, moving in huge, creeping currents. These currents rise and fall, carrying heat from the deep interior toward the surface. And in East Africa, one of these currents has created a powerful plume, a bubble of heat that pushes upward, stretching the crust above it. Think of it like a giant invisible hand beneath the earth, slowly lifting, pulling, and nudging. The crust above is not solid in the sense of a concrete sidewalk. It's fractured, broken, and full of weaknesses. So when that hot mantle plume pushes up, the crust stretches, cracks, and forms valleys. Volcanoes appear. Faults open. Lakes fill the gaps. Over millions of years, the land starts to pull apart like soft taffy. And this process is slow. So slow that the human eye can't see it. But geologists can measure it. With satellites and GPS, they track the tiny movements of the plates. A few millimeters per year here. A few centimeters over a decade there. It's almost imperceptible day by day, but over millennia, the effect is enormous. This rising heat and stretching crust explains why the Rift Valley is such a dramatic place. The lakes, volcanoes, and faults are all surface signs of forces operating deep underground. The Earth is quietly reshaping itself, one slow movement at a time. And it's happening everywhere along the rift. From Ethiopia to Mozambique, the story is the same. Heat rises, the crust stretches, cracks form, and the land gradually splits. Volcanoes are the most visible evidence of this process. Some, like Mount Kilimanjaro, may be dormant, standing like silent giants watching over the land. Others, like Nyiragongo and Erta Ale, are active and unpredictable. Lava rises through fractures in the crust, creating mountains and reshaping the surface. These eruptions don't happen daily. Sometimes they are centuries apart, but they are part of the patient, persistent work of splitting a continent. Even the earthquakes in the Rift Valley, mostly minor and unnoticeable to people, are part of the same process. They are the land's subtle adjustments, tiny shifts that relieve stress as the crust stretches. One day, these small movements will add up to something much bigger. But for now, they remind us that the Earth is alive, moving even when we sleep. Interestingly, this underground activity also explains some of the unusual lakes in the region. Lake Turkana, Lake Tanganyika, and Lake Malawi are all partially filled with water because the land beneath them is sinking as it stretches. The lakes collect water in the low points created by shifting blocks of crust. Their depth and size are directly related to the slow, patient movement underground. Without the mantle plume and the stretching crust, these lakes would not exist. Life has adapted to these changes. Fish, birds, mammals, and humans all respond to the shifting landscape. Fish species evolve in isolated lakes, flamingos gather in massive flocks, and elephants follow ancient paths along land that is slowly moving beneath their feet. Humans too. Ancient ancestors walked these valleys, adapting to the unique mix of forests, grasslands, and lakes created by the slowly stretching land. The rift is not just a geological feature, it is a cradle of life. This hidden heat and pressure explain why Africa's split is inevitable. Unlike sudden disasters, this slow movement is unstoppable. The plates above will continue to drift apart as long as the mantle plume pushes from below. It's patient, silent, persistent work, a reminder that the Earth does not hurry, yet eventually achieves incredible transformations. If you imagine standing on the surface, the Earth seems calm. Mountains rise. Valleys stretch. Lakes shimmer in the sunlight. Volcanoes glow softly at night. But deep beneath, the planet is alive, moving with an energy that operates on a completely different timescale. Millimeters per year may seem insignificant, but over millions of years, entire continents can split, oceans can form, and landscapes can be completely remade. And that's what makes the Great African Rift so special. It is a window into the processes that shape all continents, not just Africa. It shows us how the Earth has created oceans, mountains, and valleys throughout history. It teaches patience, perspective, and awe. Even in its slowest movements, the Earth is never static. It is always alive, always changing, always creating new landscapes for life to adapt to. Tonight, as you imagine the glowing lakes, the silent volcanoes, and the stretching land, remember that the Earth has been working on this story for millions of years. The continent is not just a passive landmass. It is active, alive, and slowly pulling apart. The future ocean, the deep valleys, the new mountains, all of it is being written today, beneath our feet, by heat, pressure, and time. So as you drift deeper into sleep, picture the Earth beneath you, a giant, slow-moving organism, patient and deliberate. Feel the quiet power of the mantle, the gentle stretching of the crust, the bubbling of magma, and the shaping of valleys and lakes. Africa is moving, shaping, creating, and transforming, and in its own patient, quiet way, it is telling one of the most beautiful stories the planet has ever known. As the Rift Valley continues its slow journey south, something remarkable happens. The land doesn't just split quietly, it starts to create its own little world. Mountains rise here, valleys deepen there, and lakes settle into the low points, forming ecosystems that seem almost magical. It's as if the earth is an artist, stretching its canvas and slowly painting a new masterpiece over millions of years. One of the most fascinating features of the rift is its volcanoes. Unlike the volcanoes we think of in movies, erupting with fury and chaos, many of the rift's volcanoes are patient. They bubble, they hiss, they shape the land slowly. Nyiragongo, for example, has a lava lake that glows like molten amber, quietly simmering for decades. Imagine a pot of soup that has been cooking continuously for 50 years. That's the kind of patience the earth shows here. Mount Kilimanjaro stands as another reminder of time. Though dormant, it towers over the plains like a sleeping giant. Its snow-capped peak, visible for miles around, is a quiet witness to the continent's slow transformation. Kilimanjaro didn't form in a day, and the rift didn't split in a week. Everything here is deliberate, measured, and patient. Lakes are another extraordinary part of the rift's story. Lake Tanganyika is so deep it seems bottomless, stretching far into the earth like a secret corridor. Lake Malawi is long, narrow, and strikingly turquoise, reflecting the sky so perfectly it almost feels unreal. And Lake Turkana, set against desert sands, shimmers like a jewel dropped onto the plains. These lakes are not just beautiful, they are proof that the earth is moving and shaping itself in ways we can see and touch. Water fills the cracks created by stretching land, collecting in basins formed over millions of years. The rift is not just shaping landscapes, it's shaping life. Flamingos gather in massive flocks in the salty lakes, painting the water pink. Fish evolve in isolation in the deepest lakes, creating species found nowhere else on Earth. Elephants and other animals follow ancient paths, tracing routes carved by shifting ground. And humans. Early humans walked these valleys, adapted to the unique mix of forests, grasslands, and lakes, and eventually thrived. The Rift Valley is more than a geological feature, it is a cradle of life. The underground processes that drive the rift are just as fascinating. Beneath the crust, the mantle moves in slow, creeping currents. In East Africa, a mantle plume rises like a warm bubble, pushing the crust upward and outward. This pressure stretches the land, forming cracks, valleys, and eventually new mountains. Magma rises through these cracks, sometimes spilling out as lava, sometimes pooling underground. Over millions of years, these processes slowly, inevitably split the continent. Earthquakes in the rift are mostly subtle. Small tremors ripple through the land, barely noticeable to people but measurable with sensitive instruments. They are like the heartbeat of the continent, tiny shifts that slowly relieve stress as the crust stretches. Over time, these small movements accumulate, widening valleys, forming lakes, and creating cracks that may one day split Africa entirely. The Earth works in a scale that is almost impossible for humans to fully grasp. Millimeters per year seem insignificant, yet over millions of years, they create oceans, mountains, and entire new landscapes. Despite all this movement, the Rift Valley appears calm and serene on the surface. Rolling grasslands stretch to the horizon. Water reflects the sky. Volcanoes stand silently. And yet, beneath, heat, pressure, and movement are shaping everything. This is the Earth's quiet power, not sudden or violent, but slow, persistent, and unstoppable. For the people who live in the rift, life goes on. Villages sit alongside cracks and faults, and farmers adjust their fields when the land shifts slightly. Roads sometimes sink or split, but communities repair, adapt, and continue. The rift is alive, but life here moves with it, learning to coexist with a continent that is slowly changing beneath their feet. The Rift Valley also teaches perspective. We often think of change as immediate, dramatic, and visible. But the rift shows that some of the most profound changes happen quietly, invisibly, over millions of years. Africa's slow split reminds us that transformation doesn't need urgency. Sometimes it is patient, persistent, and inevitable. It may take millions of years, but eventually, even the largest continent will bend, crack, and reshape itself. And then there's the beauty. The Rift Valley is one of the most stunning places on Earth. Volcanoes glow at night. Lakes mirror the sky. Valleys stretch endlessly. Mountains rise dramatically from the plains. Even the tiniest crack in the earth contributes to a landscape of extraordinary scale and complexity. Every feature, from the smallest fissure to the largest lake, is a note in the symphony of continental movement. As night falls, imagine the rift beneath you. The lava lakes glow softly. Flamingos wade in shallow waters, their reflections rippling gently. The mountains and valleys stretch silently, slowly, deliberately. The earth is alive, and in its quiet, patient way, it is reshaping Africa into a future continent that no human has ever seen. And yet, even as the continent splits and lakes form, life continues. Birds migrate. Animals hunt and graze. Humans build, farm, and explore. The Earth's slow movements and life's persistence are intertwined. One could almost call it a dance. The land moves, life adjusts, and the process repeats, ever so slowly, over millennia. This is the story of the rift, a continent stretching, a land evolving, a world reshaping itself without fanfare or hurry. Africa is moving southward, northward, and westward in invisible, relentless ways. Volcanoes, lakes, mountains, and valleys are its handwriting. And one day, far beyond our lifetimes, the rifting process will create a completely new geography. Until then, the Rift Valley remains a testament to the quiet power of the earth. It reminds us to look closely, to notice the slow changes around us, and to appreciate patience on a scale we can barely comprehend. The continent is alive, always moving, always creating, and in its own slow rhythm, telling one of the most remarkable stories the planet has ever written. As the Rift Valley stretches farther south, something unusual begins to happen. The land isn't just splitting, it's tilting, sagging, and folding in ways that make the landscape feel alive. Hills rise where valleys once lay, cliffs form suddenly, and rivers begin to wander, finding new paths through the slowly reshaping terrain. It's as if the earth itself is experimenting, sculpting, and quietly testing the limits of its own crust. One of the most fascinating results of this tilting and folding is the creation of the rift's deep basins. These low areas are where water collects, forming lakes of unusual shapes and vibrant colors. Lake Tanganyika, for instance, is so long and deep it feels like it could be bottomless. Its waters are home to hundreds of unique fish species that have adapted to life in isolation, evolving over millions of years. Every ripple, every movement of water, tells the story of a continent that is both breaking apart and nurturing life at the same time. The earth beneath the rift is surprisingly active. Even in places that seem calm, the crust is stretching, and magma rises quietly from the mantle. Sometimes, this molten rock makes its way to the surface, forming volcanoes and lava flows. Other times, it stays hidden, creating pockets of heat that slowly push the land upward. This underground energy is patient, invisible, but relentless, constantly shaping the surface in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. Volcanoes along the rift, though seemingly dormant at times, are reminders of the Earth's slow but powerful movements. Mount Kilimanjaro, with its iconic snow-capped peak, is a silent sentinel. Nyiragongo, with its bubbling lava lake, glows like a molten amber eye, warning us that the ground beneath is alive. Even smaller volcanic formations contribute to the landscape's ever-changing nature, as if the Earth is continuously doodling on its own surface, sketching new mountains and valleys with careful, deliberate strokes. The rift doesn't only affect the land, it influences the air, the water, and life itself. Rivers that once flowed straight now meander through new valleys. Lakes fill basins created by sinking land. Rain collects in unusual patterns, and wind shapes cliffs and ridges differently than it did 1,000 years ago. Every element of the environment responds to the slow, persistent stretching of the continent. Life in the rift has adapted to this subtle but constant motion. Flamingos gather in the salty lakes, their reflections shifting with the gentle movement of water. Elephants and other wildlife navigate paths carved by the slow sinking and rising of the land. Even humans have learned to coexist with these changes. Villagers build homes knowing that the earth beneath may shift slightly over time. Farmers adjust fields, and roads are repaired when minor cracks appear. The rift teaches patience, resilience, and the art of living with slow change. The underground forces driving the rift are fascinating because they operate on a scale we can barely perceive. Deep mantle plumes push heat upward, forcing the crust to stretch and crack. Magma slowly intrudes into the cracks, creating new layers of rock and reshaping the land from below. Tiny earthquakes, often imperceptible, release pressure and prevent catastrophic failure, maintaining a delicate balance. Over millions of years, these small, almost invisible movements accumulate into enormous changes. Valleys deepen, lakes grow, and the continent inches closer to splitting. The Rift Valley is also a laboratory of evolution. Many species exist here nowhere else on Earth, adapted to unique conditions created by the slowly changing environment. Fish evolve in isolation in deep lakes, birds adapt to shifting wetlands, and mammals navigate valleys that have formed over millennia. Humans too evolved in this landscape, learning to walk, hunt, and survive in a land that was always moving, always changing, and always offering new challenges. Despite all this activity, the rift appears calm on the surface. The plains stretch endlessly, the lakes shimmer in the sun, and the volcanoes rise quietly. It's easy to forget that beneath your feet, heat and pressure are constantly reshaping the land. The earth is patient. It works slowly, steadily, and persistently, achieving transformations that are almost impossible for us to imagine. This patience is one of the most beautiful lessons the rift teaches. Major changes don't always happen quickly. Mountains don't rise in a day, lakes don't form overnight, and continents don't split suddenly. The rift shows us that even the most extraordinary transformations can occur quietly, persistently, and patiently over millions of years. As night falls, the rift reveals another kind of magic. Volcanoes glow softly in the dark, lakes reflect the starry sky, and shadows of mountains stretch across the plains. Wildlife continues its quiet routines, moving in harmony with a landscape that is constantly changing beneath them. The earth breathes, moves, and reshapes itself, creating beauty in ways that are subtle yet profound. The slow stretching of the rift is also a reminder of the scale of geological time. The movements we see today, a millimeter or two per year, seem insignificant in human terms. But over millions of years, these tiny shifts become monumental. Valleys deepen, mountains rise, and lakes expand. One day, the rift will have transformed the continent in ways that are almost unimaginable from our current perspective. And yet, for all its slow grandeur, the Rift Valley is not a place of tension or fear. It is a place of creation, adaptation, and resilience. Every crack, every lake, every volcano is part of a larger story, a continent slowly pulling apart, shaping life, and creating new landscapes. It's a reminder that the Earth is alive, moving, and capable of extraordinary change, even when we can't perceive it in real time. As you drift deeper into sleep, imagine standing on the edge of the rift. Feel the gentle pull of the land, see the glowing lakes, and watch the mountains rise quietly in the distance. Picture the underground magma pushing slowly, patiently, relentlessly. Imagine the wildlife adapting, the water flowing, and the humans learning to coexist with a land that is alive in the slowest, most profound way imaginable. The Rift Valley is more than just a crack in the earth. It is a living, breathing example of transformation on a scale that is hard to comprehend. It shows us the beauty of patience, the power of persistence, and the inevitability of change. Africa is moving, slowly but surely, shaping its own future, and telling a story that is millions of years in the making. And as the night deepens, the continent continues its quiet work. Valleys sink, mountains rise, lakes shimmer, and the earth shifts beneath your feet, creating a landscape that is alive, patient, and endlessly fascinating. This is the story of a land that never stops moving, never stops creating, and never stops dreaming. As the Rift Valley stretches further south, the landscape begins to tell its own story. Each valley, lake, and volcano is a word in a sentence millions of years in the making. It is a slow, patient story, one that the earth has been writing long before humans arrived and will continue long after we are gone. One of the most remarkable aspects of this region is the diversity of landscapes created by the slow pull of the rift. Some areas are flat, broad plains dotted with acacia trees and grasses that ripple like golden waves in the wind. Others are dramatic cliffs and escarpments, where the land has dropped suddenly, revealing layers of ancient rock. Lakes of all sizes fill the cracks and basins, their waters varying in color from deep blue to bright turquoise to a pinkish hue in the flamingo-inhabited salt flats. Every feature tells the story of a continent slowly, deliberately reshaping itself. Volcanoes remain silent narrators of this story. Some, like the towering Kilimanjaro, stand dormant but still vigilant, while others, such as Nyiragongo and Erta Ale, bubble and glow, a gentle reminder that the earth is alive beneath the surface. Lava flows slowly, forming new rock and shaping valleys, while small earthquakes adjust the crust, preventing it from tearing too suddenly. Everything moves at a pace almost impossible for humans to perceive, yet over millions of years, the results are extraordinary. The lakes of the rift are particularly fascinating because they are incubators of life. Lake Tanganyika, for example, is one of the deepest freshwater lakes on Earth, home to hundreds of unique species of fish that exist nowhere else. Lake Malawi is similarly vibrant, its waters sheltering life that has evolved in isolation for millions of years. Even the smallest ponds in the rift can host organisms that are found nowhere else on the planet. The slow, patient splitting of the land has given lifetime and space to adapt, diversify, and thrive. This interplay between land and water is part of the magic of the rift. As the earth stretches, rivers shift their courses, filling new valleys and forming lakes. Rainwater collects in low areas, creating wetlands and salt flats. The landscape seems to move and change with every season, every rainfall, yet the underlying forces are constant, operating quietly over geological time. Animals have learned to adapt to this ever-changing environment. Elephants trace ancient paths across shifting plains. Flamingos gather in shallow lakes, following water levels that rise and fall with the land. Predators follow prey, adapting to new landscapes as valleys deepen and plateaus rise. Even humans have navigated these changes, from early hominids walking the rift millions of years ago to modern villagers adjusting their homes and fields to subtle shifts in the ground. The rift is a living classroom in adaptation, patience, and resilience. The underground forces at work are both invisible and astonishingly powerful. Beneath the crust, the mantle moves like a slow, flowing river of rock. Rising plumes of heat push upward, stretching the crust and forming the cracks, valleys, and mountains we see on the surface. Magma intrudes into these fractures, sometimes erupting as lava, sometimes remaining underground. Small earthquakes release tension, allowing the land to adjust gradually. Millimeters per year may seem trivial, but over millions of years, these tiny movements can split continents, create new oceans, and reshape entire ecosystems. The Rift Valley is also a time machine. The rocks exposed along the escarpments and in the valleys preserve a record of millions of years of geological history. Scientists can study layers of volcanic ash, sediment, and ancient fossils to understand not only how the rift formed, but also how continents and life itself have evolved. It is a place where the past, present, and future meet, visible to anyone patient enough to look closely. Even the air and weather are influenced by the rift. Mountains redirect winds, valleys channel rivers, and lakes moderate local climates. Rainfall varies dramatically depending on altitude and the shifting land, creating a mosaic of ecosystems. Forests grow where valleys provide shelter, grasslands flourish on the plains, and salt flats form where lakes evaporate in the sun. Everything in the rift is connected, moving in response to the slow, deliberate changes of the earth beneath. What makes the rift truly mesmerizing is the scale and patience of its transformation. We often think of change as sudden, dramatic, and violent. But the rift teaches a different lesson. The most profound transformations can be slow, quiet, and almost imperceptible. Millimeters of movement each year can accumulate into mountains, lakes, and valleys. Millions of years of patient stretching can reshape an entire continent. The earth moves at its own pace, and life learns to move with it. As night falls, the rift becomes even more enchanting. Volcanoes glow faintly in the darkness, lakes reflect the stars, and shadows of mountains stretch across the plains. Flamingos wade in shallow waters, elephants walk silently, and the earth continues its slow, deliberate work beneath the surface. Every crack, every fold, every lake is part of the same story, a story of a continent that is alive, patient, and endlessly creative. The Rift Valley reminds us that even the largest, most solid features of our planet are not fixed. Africa is moving, reshaping, and creating itself slowly but relentlessly. Mountains rise, valleys deepen, lakes form, and volcanoes glow. Life adapts, evolves, and thrives in response. The land may shift imperceptibly day by day, but over millions of years, the results are profound, transformative, and beautiful. And as you drift deeper into sleep tonight, imagine standing in the rift. Feel the gentle pull of the land, see the glowing lakes and silent volcanoes, and sense the quiet, patient power of the earth at work. This is the story of a continent in motion, a tale of slow creation, patient transformation, and life learning to adapt to a world that never stands still. The Rift Valley is more than a geographical feature. It is a living testament to the incredible patience and creativity of our planet. It teaches us to slow down, to notice subtle changes, and to appreciate the quiet forces that shape everything around us. Africa is moving, growing, and changing, and in its slow, deliberate rhythm, it tells one of the most extraordinary stories the Earth has ever known. As the Rift Valley continues to stretch southward, the land begins to tell a story of slow transformation that is hard to see with the naked eye, but impossible to ignore once you know what to look for. The cracks in the earth, the rising mountains, the deep lakes, and the gentle tilts of the land are all part of a process millions of years in the making. It's a quiet drama, one that unfolds slowly, patiently, and persistently. One of the most fascinating things about the rift is how it connects life and land. The shifting terrain creates new habitats, encouraging plants and animals to adapt in ways that are both subtle and extraordinary. Lakes form in sinking valleys, providing water for fish, birds, and mammals. Mountains rise, creating microclimates where forests thrive. Valleys deepen, shaping rivers that nourish grasslands and wetlands. Each feature, each slight movement of the earth, plays a role in the larger ecosystem, a reminder that the land and life are inseparable in this slowly evolving landscape. Volcanoes continue to mark the land like quiet, glowing witnesses. Some, like Mount Kilimanjaro, rise silently, majestic and unmoving for now. Others, like Nyiragongo, bubble with molten lava, glowing in the darkness like giant amber eyes. The constant heat and occasional eruptions remind us that beneath the surface, the earth is alive and active, shaping the land in subtle but powerful ways. Even when we don't feel it, the ground beneath is adjusting, stretching, and creating new formations. The lakes of the rift are extraordinary in both beauty and scientific significance. Lake Tanganyika is one of the deepest freshwater lakes on the planet, its waters home to hundreds of unique fish species found nowhere else. Lake Malawi stretches like a turquoise ribbon, sheltering life that has evolved in isolation for millions of years. These lakes are formed in depressions created by the Earth's slow stretching and sinking, evidence of the continent's persistent motion over geological time. Water is both a mirror of the land's movement and a habitat shaped by it, a living testament to the ongoing story of the rift. Animals have adapted to the slow, steady changes of the rift in remarkable ways. Elephants trace ancient migratory paths along shifting plains. Flamingos gather in vast flocks in shallow lakes, moving with the seasonal fluctuations of water levels. Predators and prey alike navigate a landscape that changes imperceptibly from year to year, yet dramatically over millennia. Humans, too, have adapted. Early hominids learned to walk, hunt, and survive in the rift's diverse environments, while modern communities adjust their homes, fields, and roads to subtle shifts in the ground. The rift is a living example of resilience and adaptation. Beneath the surface, the mantle continues its patient work. Plumes of heat rise slowly, pushing the crust upward and outward, creating cracks and valleys. Magma intrudes into these fractures, sometimes erupting as lava, sometimes remaining below, quietly reshaping the land. Small earthquakes relieve stress and prevent catastrophic failure, allowing the continent to stretch gradually over millions of years. Millimeters per year may seem insignificant, but over time, they create valleys, mountains, lakes, and eventually, the conditions for a continent to split. The Rift Valley also reminds us of the concept of geological time. Humans experience time in seconds, minutes, and years, but the Earth moves on a scale that is almost impossible for us to grasp. 1 million years may be fast in the Earth's terms, while thousands of years barely register. The slow stretching of the rift, invisible day by day, accumulates into massive transformations over eons. Valleys deepen, mountains rise, lakes expand, and life continues to adapt, evolve, and thrive. Even the air, the weather, and the climate are influenced by the rift. Mountains redirect winds, valleys channel rivers, and lakes moderate temperatures. Rainfall varies depending on elevation and the shifting land, creating diverse ecosystems. Forests, grasslands, and wetlands respond to the subtle changes of the Earth, all woven together by the slow, deliberate movements of the continent. Everything in the rift is connected, moving in harmony with forces that are invisible yet powerful. The patient power of the rift teaches a profound lesson. Transformation does not always require sudden, violent events. Sometimes, the most extraordinary changes happen quietly, almost imperceptibly. Millimeters of movement per year, hundreds of thousands of years of patient stretching, and millions of years of slow evolution can produce mountains, lakes, and entire landscapes. The Earth does not hurry, yet it achieves results beyond imagination. As night falls, the rift takes on a magical quality. Volcanoes glow softly in the darkness. Lakes reflect the starry sky. Shadows of mountains stretch across the plains. Flamingos wade in shallow waters. Elephants move silently along ancient paths. The Earth continues its slow, deliberate work beneath the surface, reshaping the continent with patience and precision. Each valley, each lake, each crack tells a story of creation, adaptation, and transformation over millions of years. The Rift Valley is more than a geological feature. It is a living testament to the incredible patience and creativity of our planet. Africa is moving, slowly and steadily, shaping its own future. Valleys deepen, lakes expand, mountains rise, and volcanoes glow. Life adapts, evolves, and thrives in response. The land may shift imperceptibly day by day, but over millions of years, the results are transformative, beautiful, and awe-inspiring. And as you drift deeper into sleep tonight, imagine yourself standing in the rift. Feel the gentle pull of the land, see the glowing lakes and silent volcanoes, and sense the quiet, patient power of the earth beneath your feet. Africa is moving, growing, and changing. It is alive, deliberate, and endlessly fascinating. And in its slow, patient rhythm, it tells one of the most extraordinary stories the planet has ever known. As we continue our journey along the Rift Valley, the slow drama of Africa's split becomes more apparent. The land is not static. It breathes. It moves. It stretches and bends in ways that are almost imperceptible. Yet, over millions of years, the changes are profound. Valleys deepen, lakes expand, mountains rise, and the earth quietly reshapes itself beneath our feet. One of the most fascinating parts of the rift is the way it forms enormous basins. These low-lying areas are like nature's bowls, collecting water from rainfall and rivers that are redirected by the slowly shifting land. Lakes like Tanganyika, Malawi, and Turkana exist because the earth has stretched and sunk over millennia. Their waters are deep and rich, home to fish species found nowhere else on earth. These lakes are living evidence that the land is not still. They are mirrors of the slow but unstoppable movement of the continent. The volcanoes that line the rift continue to remind us of the Earth's power. Some stand dormant, like Kilimanjaro, tall and serene. Others, like Nyiragongo, bubble with molten lava, glowing softly like amber eyes in the night. Lava flows slowly across the landscape, reshaping valleys and creating new rock. It's easy to imagine the Earth taking its time, patiently creating a future it knows we cannot yet see. The mountains, lakes, and lava all speak the same language: slow, deliberate transformation. Even the tiniest earthquakes are part of this story. Most are barely noticeable, a tremor here, a slight shake there, yet they relieve stress in the crust and prevent sudden, catastrophic breaks. The land adjusts gently, like a living thing slowly stretching its muscles. Over millions of years, these small movements accumulate, creating valleys, raising mountains, and expanding lakes. Every millimeter counts in this grand, patient process. Life in the rift has learned to adapt to this slow motion. Elephants trace ancient paths across the shifting plains, following routes that have existed for millennia. Flamingos gather in the shallow salt lakes, moving in perfect synchrony with water levels that rise and fall as the land sinks and shifts. Predators and prey alike navigate a constantly changing landscape, adjusting their behavior and patterns to the slow rhythm of the earth. And humans, both ancient and modern, have found ways to live in harmony with these shifts, building villages, cultivating fields, and moving with the land rather than against it. The mantle beneath the rift is a patient artist, pushing heat upward, slowly stretching the crust. Magma intrudes into fractures, sometimes erupting as lava, sometimes remaining underground to nudge the land from below. Small earthquakes relieve pressure, while the gradual stretching creates cracks, valleys, and mountains. Millimeters of movement per year might seem trivial to us, but over millions of years, they transform the continent. The Earth works on a timeline that is almost impossible for humans to grasp. Rivers and lakes respond to these changes in fascinating ways. As valleys deepen and land sinks, water collects in new basins. Rivers shift courses, creating wetlands and channels that never existed before. Lakes become cradles of life, supporting birds, fish, and mammals that evolve in isolation. Even the tiniest pools in the rift can host species found nowhere else. The slow, deliberate movements of the land have given life both time and space to adapt, diversify, and flourish. The Rift Valley is also a reminder of the Earth's patience. We are used to thinking of change as sudden, dramatic, or violent. But the rift teaches a different lesson. Transformation can be quiet, persistent, and slow. Millimeters of movement per year, accumulated over millions of years, create valleys, mountains, lakes, and eventually oceans. The Earth does not rush. It moves at its own pace, yet its results are extraordinary. As night falls, the rift becomes even more enchanting. Lava lakes glow softly in the dark, reflecting in nearby waters. Flamingos wade in shallow salt flats, their pink feathers mirrored in the water. Elephants move silently across the plains, and the stars shimmer above, reflected in the lakes. Beneath everything, the earth continues its patient work, shaping the land, creating new features, and writing a story that is millions of years in the making. The Rift Valley is more than a geographical feature. It is a living testament to the quiet power of the earth. Africa is moving, slowly but surely, reshaping its own future. Valleys deepen, lakes expand, mountains rise, and volcanoes glow. Life adapts, evolves, and thrives. The land may shift imperceptibly day by day, but over millions of years, the transformation is profound, beautiful, and awe-inspiring. Imagine standing in the rift at night. Feel the gentle pull of the land beneath your feet, hear the soft movements of the earth, and see the glowing lakes and silent volcanoes. Life moves gracefully across this shifting landscape, and the planet continues its patient work, stretching, shaping, and creating. Africa is alive. It is deliberate. And it is telling a story that is far greater than any of us. The slow, patient movements of the rift teach us about time, perspective, and resilience. Even the largest and most solid features of the earth are not fixed. Continents can split, mountains can rise, valleys can deepen, and life can adapt to even the slowest changes. The earth moves with quiet determination, and in its patient rhythm, it shapes the world in ways that are extraordinary and humbling. And as you drift further into sleep, picture the rift in all its slow-moving glory. Imagine the lakes shimmering under the stars, the volcanoes glowing softly, the elephants wandering ancient paths, and the flamingos gathering in perfect synchrony. Picture the mantle below, pushing heat upward, stretching the crust, and patiently creating the Africa of tomorrow. The continent moves, grows, and transforms, quietly, persistently, and beautifully. The Rift Valley is more than a story of land. It is a story of life, time, patience, and transformation. It reminds us that even the slowest forces, when given enough time, can create beauty, complexity, and wonder. Africa is alive, shaping its future 1 millimeter at a time, and in its patient, deliberate rhythm, it tells one of the most extraordinary stories the planet has ever known. As we travel further along the Rift Valley, it becomes clear that this landscape is alive in ways most of us never notice. Mountains rise, valleys deepen, lakes form, and volcanoes glow, all as part of a process that has been unfolding for millions of years. It is a story written in stone, water, and fire, a slow, deliberate story that the earth tells quietly, without hurry, yet with astonishing power. One of the most captivating things about the rift is its lakes. Unlike ordinary lakes that simply sit in depressions, Rift Valley lakes are the result of the land stretching, sinking, and shifting. Lake Tanganyika, one of the deepest freshwater lakes on the planet, stretches like a dark blue ribbon across the valley. Its depths harbor hundreds of unique fish species, evolving in isolation for millions of years. Lake Malawi, long and narrow, reflects the sky so perfectly it almost seems unreal. Even Lake Turkana, set against desert sands, shimmers like a jewel dropped onto the plains. These lakes are more than just beautiful. They are living evidence of the Earth's slow, persistent motion. Volcanoes are equally remarkable. Some, like Mount Kilimanjaro, rise silently, their snow-capped peaks a serene reminder of the forces that shaped them. Others, like Nyiragongo, bubble and hiss, glowing orange like molten eyes watching over the land. Lava flows slowly, creating new landforms, filling valleys, and reshaping the surface. Even when the activity is not dramatic, the earth is working tirelessly beneath our feet, stretching, cracking, and creating. The slow motion of the rift also produces earthquakes, though most are tiny and barely felt. These subtle tremors act as pressure valves, releasing stress as the crust stretches. Over thousands or millions of years, the cumulative effect of these minor quakes is massive. Valleys grow, mountains rise, and lakes expand. It's a quiet rhythm, almost like the heartbeat of the continent, imperceptible to humans but undeniable to the land itself. Life in the Rift Valley has learned to move with this rhythm. Elephants follow ancient paths across plains that are slowly tilting. Flamingos gather in enormous flocks on shallow salt lakes, their pink reflections dancing across the water. Fish evolve in isolated lakes, while birds and mammals navigate the ever-changing terrain. Even humans, from early hominids to modern villagers, have adapted to the land's subtle shifts. They build homes knowing the ground may move slightly, farm fields that sink or tilt, and adjust their lives to the patient, persistent motion of the earth. Beneath the surface, the mantle drives this slow transformation. Hot rock rises, pushing the crust upward and outward. Magma intrudes into fractures, sometimes erupting, sometimes forming underground reservoirs. These forces create mountains, valleys, lakes, and volcanoes, often invisible to the casual observer. The Earth stretches slowly millimeter by millimeter each year, but over millions of years, the cumulative effect is breathtaking. The land itself seems to breathe, expanding and contracting in a rhythm we can barely perceive. Rivers also respond to the slow stretching. As valleys sink, water collects in new basins, forming lakes and wetlands. Rivers change course, sometimes dramatically, over thousands of years. Rainwater follows new paths carved by the shifting land. The result is a constantly evolving network of habitats, each shaped by the subtle but unstoppable movements beneath the surface. This slow interaction between land and water is one of the rift's most remarkable features, shaping life in ways that are both delicate and extraordinary. The rift teaches patience in every aspect of its existence. Mountains don't rise overnight. Lakes don't form in a decade. Continents don't split in a single human lifetime. Everything unfolds on a timeline almost impossible for humans to grasp. Millimeters per year accumulate into valleys and mountains. Millions of years of stretching produce lakes, and eventually, entire continents can split. The Earth moves at its own pace, quietly but powerfully, reshaping the world in ways we cannot fully imagine. At night, the rift takes on a magical quality. Volcanoes glow softly, lakes reflect the starry sky, and shadows stretch across the plains. Flamingos wade in shallow waters, elephants walk silently across tilting plains, and the Earth continues its patient, deliberate work. Everything in the landscape is connected, from the smallest crack to the deepest lake. The land, water, and life move together in harmony with the forces shaping the continent beneath them. The slow transformation of the rift also reminds us that the Earth is resilient. Life adapts, evolves, and thrives even as mountains rise and valleys deepen. Ecosystems shift with the land, creating new opportunities for species to diversify. Humans, too, have learned to coexist with this ever-changing environment, adjusting their villages, farms, and roads to the subtle movements beneath them. The Earth is patient, and life, in turn, is patient. Imagine standing in the rift at night. Feel the gentle pull of the land beneath your feet. See the glowing lakes reflecting stars above. Watch volcanoes simmer quietly in the distance. Notice flamingos moving gracefully across salt flats, and elephants tracing paths etched over millennia. Beneath it all, the Earth works slowly but persistently, shaping mountains, valleys, and lakes, and preparing the continent for a future that no human has seen. The Rift Valley is not just a geological feature, it is a living story, unfolding over millions of years. It shows us that the Earth is alive, patient, and deliberate. Valleys deepen, lakes expand, mountains rise, and volcanoes glow. Life adapts, evolves, and thrives. The land shifts imperceptibly day by day, but over millennia, the changes are extraordinary. As you drift deeper into sleep, imagine the slow, patient rhythm of the rift. Imagine lakes shimmering under the moonlight, volcanoes glowing softly, and mountains rising silently. Picture the mantle below, pushing heat upward, stretching the crust, and quietly creating new landscapes. Africa is alive, deliberate, and endlessly fascinating. And in this slow, patient movement, the continent tells one of the most extraordinary stories the planet has ever known. The Rift Valley is a landscape that seems frozen in time, yet nothing could be further from the truth. Every mountain, lake, and valley tells a story of movement, stretching, and slow transformation. It's a continent quietly in motion, and the changes are happening beneath our feet in ways that are both subtle and profound. One of the most striking aspects of the rift is how it shapes water. Lakes collect in depressions created by sinking land, forming ecosystems that are unique to this region. Lake Tanganyika is so deep it feels like a secret corridor into the earth. Its dark, cold waters shelter species of fish that exist nowhere else. Lake Malawi stretches long and narrow, cradling life in isolation, while Lake Turkana shimmers against desert sands like a jewel dropped from the sky. The very presence of these lakes is a testament to the patient work of the earth, slowly stretching and shaping the land over millions of years. Volcanoes provide another layer to this story. Kilimanjaro rises like a serene sentinel, its snow-capped peak a quiet reminder of geological patience. Nyiragongo and Erta Ale bubble with molten lava, their glowing surfaces a soft, fiery heartbeat in the night. Lava flows reshape valleys, mountains rise gradually, and even when the activity is subtle, it reminds us that the earth is never truly still. The ground beneath us is alive, moving slowly but persistently. Earthquakes in the rift are mostly minor, but they are part of this patient process. Tiny tremors act as pressure relief valves, allowing the crust to stretch without catastrophic failure. Over millennia, these small adjustments accumulate, gradually shaping valleys, mountains, and lakes. It's a reminder that the Earth's work is quiet but relentless, invisible day by day, yet astonishing in the long view. Life in the rift has adapted to this slow transformation. Elephants follow paths carved over millions of years, tracing routes shaped by the subtle stretching of the land. Flamingos gather in vast flocks on shallow salt flats, moving with the changing water levels. Fish evolve in isolated lakes, birds adapt to shifting wetlands, and mammals navigate valleys that deepen slowly over time. Humans, from early hominids to present-day villagers, have learned to coexist with a land that is alive and moving, adjusting homes, fields, and roads to the gentle shifts beneath their feet. The forces beneath the surface are fascinating. Plumes of hot rock rise from the mantle, pushing the crust upward and outward. Magma intrudes into fractures, sometimes erupting, sometimes forming underground reservoirs. The land stretches, tilts, and sinks. Millimeters of movement per year might seem inconsequential to us, yet over millions of years, they produce valleys, mountains, and eventually, conditions for a continent to split. The Earth works on its own timeline, one that requires patience and perspective to fully appreciate. Rivers, lakes, and wetlands respond beautifully to this slow movement. Valleys deepen, water collects in new basins, and rivers change course, creating wetlands and channels that did not exist 1,000 years ago. The land and water move together in a delicate dance, shaping life and providing space for ecosystems to thrive. Even the tiniest pond may host species found nowhere else, evolving quietly as the land around it transforms. The Rift Valley teaches a profound lesson about patience. Most of the most extraordinary changes on Earth are not sudden or violent. Valleys deepen, lakes expand, mountains rise, and continents shift over millions of years. Millimeters of movement per year accumulate into transformations so vast that they are almost unimaginable from our human perspective. The Earth is deliberate, moving slowly but achieving results of extraordinary magnitude. At night, the rift becomes even more enchanting. Volcanoes glow softly, lakes mirror the stars, and shadows of mountains stretch across the plains. Flamingos wade in shallow waters, elephants walk silently, and life moves gracefully in harmony with a land that is slowly transforming. The Earth's work continues beneath the surface, unseen but powerful, shaping valleys, lakes, and mountains in ways that are both patient and beautiful. The slow, patient movements of the rift remind us that the Earth is resilient. Life adapts, evolves, and thrives even as mountains rise and valleys deepen. Ecosystems shift, creating opportunities for species to diversify. Humans adjust, learning to coexist with this constantly changing landscape. The Earth is patient, and life, in turn, becomes patient too. Imagine standing in the rift at night. Feel the subtle pull of the land beneath your feet. See glowing lakes and volcanoes, mountains stretching silently into the sky. Observe flamingos moving across salt flats, elephants tracing paths etched over millennia, and fish swimming in deep, isolated waters. Beneath it all, the Earth is working patiently, shaping the continent with deliberate care. Africa is alive, moving, and constantly transforming. The Rift Valley is more than a geological wonder. It is a living story of creation, transformation, and adaptation. Valleys deepen, lakes expand, mountains rise, and volcanoes glow. Life evolves alongside the slow rhythm of the Earth. The land may shift imperceptibly day by day, but over millions of years, the transformations are magnificent, breathtaking, and awe-inspiring. As you drift further into sleep, imagine the rift in all its slow-moving glory. Picture lakes shimmering under the moonlight, volcanoes glowing softly, mountains rising silently, and wildlife moving gracefully across the plains. Picture the mantle below, pushing heat upward, stretching the crust, and quietly creating new landscapes. Africa is alive, deliberate, and endlessly fascinating. In its patient rhythm, the continent tells one of the most extraordinary stories the Earth has ever known. As the Rift Valley continues its slow transformation, the scale of the change becomes even more astonishing. The land is stretching, sinking, and tilting in ways that are nearly imperceptible on a human timescale but monumental over millions of years. Valleys deepen, lakes expand, mountains rise, and the Earth quietly reshapes itself beneath our feet, creating a landscape both serene and dynamic. One of the most remarkable aspects of the rift is how it shapes water. As the land stretches and sinks, depressions form, filling with rainfall and river water to create deep, vibrant lakes. Lake Tanganyika, one of the deepest freshwater lakes on Earth, stretches far into the valley, its dark waters concealing hundreds of unique fish species found nowhere else. Lake Malawi is long and narrow, turquoise waters reflecting the sky like a painter's canvas. Lake Turkana, set against the desert, shimmers like a jewel, holding life in isolated pockets. These lakes are living evidence of the patient work of the Earth, shaping habitats over millions of years. Volcanoes continue to mark the rift's landscape with silent grandeur. Mount Kilimanjaro rises proudly, its snow-capped peak a serene sentinel watching over the land. Nyiragongo, with its bubbling lava lake, glows like molten amber, a reminder that the Earth is alive beneath the surface. Lava flows slowly, reshaping valleys, forming new rock, and quietly sculpting the landscape. Even when the activity seems calm, the Earth is constantly at work, stretching, cracking, and creating. Even the smallest earthquakes are part of this patient transformation. Tiny tremors act like the Earth exhaling, releasing tension as the crust stretches. Over millennia, these small adjustments accumulate into massive changes. Valleys grow, mountains rise, and lakes expand. It's a quiet rhythm, a heartbeat that the land keeps for millions of years, almost invisible to humans, yet essential to the continent's slow evolution. Life in the rift has adapted remarkably to this gradual motion. Elephants follow ancient migratory paths across slowly tilting plains. Flamingos gather in vast flocks on shallow salt lakes, adjusting with the water levels that change as the land sinks. Fish evolve in isolation within deep lakes, while birds and mammals navigate ever-changing valleys. Humans, too, have learned to coexist with this dynamic land, adjusting homes, fields, and roads to accommodate the Earth's gentle movements. The rift teaches resilience and patience, both for life and for the land itself. Beneath the surface, the Earth's forces are invisible yet powerful. Mantle plumes push heat upward, gradually stretching the crust. Magma intrudes into fractures, sometimes erupting, sometimes remaining underground, quietly reshaping the land. Millimeters per year may seem trivial, but over millions of years, they create valleys, lakes, and mountains. The Earth works on a scale that challenges human perception, patient and deliberate in its creativity. Rivers respond to these slow shifts in fascinating ways. Valleys deepen and water collects in new basins, creating lakes and wetlands. River courses slowly shift, forming channels and small deltas that did not exist before. Water moves in harmony with the land, carving paths, nourishing habitats, and supporting life. Even the smallest ponds can harbor species that exist nowhere else, evolving quietly in response to the shifting terrain. The Rift Valley teaches a lesson in patience. Change is not always sudden or dramatic. Valleys deepen, lakes grow, mountains rise, and continents shift over millions of years. Millimeters of movement per year, when accumulated over geological time, transform the landscape in ways that are both subtle and breathtaking. The Earth moves deliberately, slowly, yet achieves results of extraordinary magnitude. As night falls, the rift transforms into a magical landscape. Volcanoes glow softly in the darkness. Lakes reflect the stars like mirrors. Mountains cast long shadows over plains. Flamingos move gracefully across shallow waters, and elephants tread silently along ancient paths. The Earth continues its patient work beneath the surface, shaping valleys, lakes, and mountains with quiet precision. Each element in the landscape contributes to a living story of creation and transformation. The slow motion of the rift reminds us that the Earth is resilient and life is adaptable. Ecosystems adjust to changes in topography, creating new niches for species to thrive. Animals evolve in response to shifting landscapes, and humans have learned to coexist with the land's gentle movements. The Earth is patient, and life learns patience in return. Imagine standing in the rift at night, feeling the subtle pull of the land beneath your feet. See glowing lakes reflecting the stars, volcanoes simmering softly, and mountains stretching silently into the sky. Observe flamingos on the salt flats, elephants following paths etched over millennia, and fish swimming in isolated, deep waters. Beneath it all, the Earth moves patiently, slowly reshaping the continent with deliberate care. Africa is alive, moving, and transforming with a quiet, unstoppable rhythm. The Rift Valley is more than a geological feature. It is a living, breathing story of creation, adaptation, and evolution. Valleys deepen, lakes expand, mountains rise, and volcanoes glow. Life evolves alongside the slow rhythm of the Earth. The land may shift imperceptibly day by day, but over millions of years, the changes are extraordinary, breathtaking, and awe-inspiring. As you drift further into sleep, imagine the rift in all its quiet glory. Lakes shimmer under the moonlight, volcanoes glow softly, mountains rise silently, and wildlife moves gracefully across the land. Picture the mantle below, pushing heat upward, stretching the crust, and quietly creating new landscapes. Africa is alive, deliberate, and endlessly fascinating. In this slow, patient rhythm, the continent tells one of the most extraordinary stories the planet has ever known. As we reach the southern stretches of the Rift Valley, the story of Africa's slow transformation becomes even more awe-inspiring. The land continues to stretch, tilt, and sink, shaping valleys, mountains, and lakes in ways that are almost imperceptible day by day but monumental over millions of years. It's a story written in stone, water, and fire, a patient tale the earth tells without hurry but with astonishing creativity. One of the most remarkable aspects of the rift is the formation of its lakes. These bodies of water exist because the land sinks, creating natural basins that collect rainfall and river water. Lake Tanganyika, deep and mysterious, stretches far into the valley, hiding unique species of fish evolved in isolation. Lake Malawi reflects the sky in turquoise brilliance, cradling life that exists nowhere else. Lake Turkana, framed by desert sands, shimmers like a jewel, supporting ecosystems in the harshest of climates. These lakes are living evidence of the Earth's patient work, shaping habitats over millions of years. Volcanoes punctuate the landscape, silent reminders of the energy beneath the surface. Kilimanjaro rises majestically, a serene sentinel watching over the rift. Nyiragongo and Urta Ale bubble with molten lava, glowing softly in the night. Lava slowly flows across valleys, forming new rock and reshaping the land. Even when eruptions are minor or distant, they remind us that the earth is constantly at work, stretching, cracking, and creating. Earthquakes, mostly small and barely noticeable, are part of the rift's slow transformation. They act as gentle pressure relief valves, allowing the crust to stretch without catastrophic failure. Over millennia, these small tremors accumulate into vast changes. Valleys deepen, mountains rise, and lakes expand. The earth moves quietly, patiently, steadily, sculpting a landscape that seems eternal yet is constantly evolving. Life in the Rift Valley has adapted beautifully to this slow motion. Elephants follow ancient migratory paths across tilting plains. Flamingos gather in vast flocks on shallow salt lakes, moving in response to water levels that change as the land sinks. Fish evolve in isolated lakes, while birds and mammals navigate shifting valleys. Humans, too, have learned to coexist with a dynamic land, adjusting villages, fields, and roads to accommodate gentle movements. The rift teaches resilience and patience, for both life and the earth itself. Beneath the surface, forces invisible to our eyes continue their patient work. Mantle plumes push heat upward, gradually stretching the crust. Magma intrudes into fractures, sometimes erupting, sometimes forming underground reservoirs. Millimeters per year may seem trivial, but over millions of years, these subtle movements create valleys, lakes, and mountains. The earth operates on a scale that challenges human perception, deliberate and unstoppable. Rivers and wetlands also respond to these shifts. Valleys deepen and fill with water, creating new habitats. River courses shift slowly, forming channels and small deltas. Water moves in harmony with the land, carving paths, nourishing ecosystems, and supporting life. Even tiny ponds harbor species found nowhere else, evolving quietly as the land around them transforms. The Rift Valley is a lesson in patience. Transformation is not always sudden or dramatic. Valleys deepen, lakes grow, mountains rise, and continents shift over millions of years. Millimeters per year, when accumulated over geological time, produce extraordinary landscapes. The earth moves deliberately, slowly, yet achieves results beyond imagination. At night, the rift becomes almost magical. Volcanoes glow softly, lakes reflect the starry sky, and mountain shadows stretch across plains. Flamingos move gracefully across shallow waters. Elephants tread silently along ancient paths. The earth continues its patient work beneath the surface, shaping valleys, lakes, and mountains with quiet precision. Each element in the landscape contributes to a living story of creation and transformation. The slow motion of the rift reminds us that the earth is resilient, and life is adaptable. Ecosystems adjust to changes in topography, creating niches for species to thrive. Animals evolve in response to shifting landscapes. Humans coexist with the land's gentle movements. The earth is patient, and life learns patience in return. Imagine standing in the rift at night. Feel the subtle pull of the land beneath your feet. See glowing lakes and volcanoes, mountains stretching silently into the sky. Observe flamingos on salt flats, elephants tracing paths etched over millennia, and fish swimming in isolated, deep waters. Beneath it all, the earth works patiently, slowly reshaping the continent with deliberate care. Africa is alive, moving, and transforming with a quiet, unstoppable rhythm. The Rift Valley is more than a geological feature. It is a living story of creation, adaptation, and evolution. Valleys deepen, lakes expand, mountains rise, and volcanoes glow. Life evolves alongside the slow rhythm of the earth. The land may shift imperceptibly day by day, but over millions of years, the changes are extraordinary, breathtaking, and awe-inspiring. As you drift further into sleep, imagine the rift in all its quiet glory. Lakes shimmer under moonlight, volcanoes glow softly, mountains rise silently, and wildlife moves gracefully across the land. Picture the mantle below, pushing heat upward, stretching the crust, and quietly creating new landscapes. Africa is alive, deliberate, and endlessly fascinating. In this slow, patient rhythm, the continent tells one of the most extraordinary stories the planet has ever known. And so, as night deepens and stars shimmer above, the Rift Valley continues its patient work. Valleys deepen, lakes glimmer, mountains rise, and life adapts. The earth moves, quietly but relentlessly, shaping a continent and telling a story that has been unfolding for millions of years, and will continue long after we are gone. As we journey further along the Rift Valley, it's easy to forget that what seems like solid, unchanging land is, in fact, slowly stretching and bending. Africa is moving, almost imperceptibly, yet the consequences of this patient motion are profound. Valleys lengthen, lakes expand, mountains rise, and the earth quietly reshapes the continent, writing a story in stone, water, and lava that unfolds over millions of years. One of the most remarkable things about the rift is how it molds life through its slow movements. Valleys sink, forming basins that fill with water. Lakes like Tanganyika and Malawi cradle species that have evolved in isolation, creating ecosystems found nowhere else. Even smaller lakes and ponds host unique life, from tiny fish to microorganisms, thriving in the niches created by a land that is constantly in motion. The Earth's slow stretching has given life time and space to adapt, diversify, and flourish. Volcanoes continue to remind us that the Earth is alive beneath the surface. Kilimanjaro towers silently, its snow-capped peak unshaken, while Nyiragongo bubbles and glows, a molten eye keeping watch over the land. Lava flows slowly across valleys, forming new rock and altering the terrain. Mountains rise not in a single dramatic moment, but millimeter by millimeter, year by year, until the land itself seems to breathe with life and purpose. Even the smallest earthquakes play a crucial role. Tiny tremors release tension in the crust, allowing the land to stretch without catastrophic failure. Over millennia, these small adjustments accumulate, creating valleys, mountains, and lakes that would astonish anyone seeing them all at once. The earth moves with patience, deliberately, quietly, shaping a continent with invisible hands. Life in the rift has learned to adapt to this rhythm. Elephants trace ancient migratory paths across slowly tilting plains. Flamingos gather in salt lakes that rise and fall with the land. Fish evolve in isolated waters, while birds and mammals navigate shifting valleys. Humans, too, have found ways to coexist with this patient motion, building homes, cultivating fields, and adjusting roads to align with the slow, subtle changes beneath them. Adaptation is not optional here, it is a requirement, a lesson in resilience. Beneath the surface, the mantle is the hidden artist of this masterpiece. Hot rock rises, stretching the crust and forming fractures. Magma intrudes into these cracks, sometimes erupting as lava, sometimes remaining underground to slowly nudge the land from below. The movements may seem tiny, but over millions of years, they create valleys, lakes, and mountains. Millimeters per year accumulate into transformations so vast that continents themselves can eventually split. The Earth works on a scale almost impossible for humans to grasp, deliberate and patient in its creativity. Rivers, wetlands, and lakes respond beautifully to these shifts. Water collects in new depressions, forming habitats that did not exist before. Rivers change course slowly, creating wetlands and channels that nurture ecosystems. Even the smallest pools can host life that evolves quietly, perfectly adapted to its environment. The land and water move together, shaping one another over time, creating a symphony of life orchestrated by forces invisible to the naked eye. The Rift Valley teaches a profound lesson about time and patience. Transformation is rarely sudden or dramatic. Valleys deepen, lakes grow, mountains rise, and even continents shift over millions of years. Millimeters of movement each year might seem insignificant to humans, yet over eons, the effects are extraordinary. The Earth is deliberate, and the results are breathtaking in their scale and beauty. At night, the rift becomes almost magical. Volcanoes glow softly in the dark. Lakes reflect the stars like mirrors, while mountain shadows stretch across plains. Flamingos move gracefully on shallow salt flats, elephants tread silently along ancient paths, and life continues to move in harmony with a land that is slowly reshaping itself. Beneath it all, the earth works tirelessly, quietly crafting mountains, valleys, and lakes, revealing the patient rhythm of creation. The slow, patient motion of the rift reminds us that the earth is resilient. Life adapts, evolves, and thrives alongside shifting landscapes. Ecosystems adjust to new topography, creating niches for species to flourish. Humans coexist with the gentle changes, learning patience in response to the Earth's quiet rhythm. This land teaches a lesson about resilience, persistence, and the beauty of slow, deliberate change. Imagine standing in the rift at night. Feel the subtle pull of the land beneath your feet. See glowing lakes reflecting the stars, volcanoes simmering softly, and mountains rising slowly into the sky. Observe flamingos moving across salt flats, elephants following ancient paths, and fish swimming in deep, isolated waters. Beneath it all, the earth continues its patient work, shaping Africa with slow, deliberate care. The Rift Valley is more than a geological feature. It is a living story of creation, adaptation, and evolution. Valleys deepen, lakes expand, mountains rise, and volcanoes glow. Life evolves alongside the patient rhythm of the earth. The land may shift imperceptibly day by day, but over millions of years, the transformations are extraordinary and awe-inspiring. As you drift further into sleep, picture the rift in all its quiet glory. Lakes shimmer under the moonlight, volcanoes glow softly, mountains rise silently, and wildlife moves gracefully across the land. Picture the mantle below, pushing heat upward, stretching the crust, and quietly creating new landscapes. Africa is alive, deliberate, and endlessly fascinating. In this patient rhythm, the continent tells one of the most extraordinary stories the planet has ever known. A story still unfolding, quietly, beneath our very feet. And so, our journey through the slowly shifting lands of Africa comes to a gentle pause, for now. The Rift Valley continues its quiet work, stretching, tilting, and shaping the continent, while life adapts and thrives in harmony with the Earth's patient rhythm. If you enjoyed drifting through this story tonight, why not stay a little longer? Subscribe to our channel, and join us on more journeys through the hidden, mysterious, and fascinating corners of history and our world. Turn on the notification bell, and you'll never miss a story that soothes your mind while awakening your curiosity. There's a whole universe of tales waiting for you. Stories that span time, land, and the extraordinary forces that shape them. Thank you for watching, for letting your imagination wander, and for sharing a quiet moment with the wonders of our planet. Sweet dreams, and until next time, may the world's stories gently carry you to sleep.